The word disruption has a negative connotation because by definition it means a radical departure from the normal way of doing things. And radical is exactly what the Bajaj and Triumph Alliance were gunning for when it came to the new entry-level motorcycle, the Speed 400. The idea here was to do something which the industry deemed impossible. To launch a thoroughbred Triumph in terms of craftsmanship, componentry and performance, and at the same time make it ridiculously accessible by launching it at a price which Bajaj has been renowned for. And disrupt they did by launching the Speed 400 at an insane introductory price of 2.23 lakhs, thereby seeing it undercut the newly launched Harley 440X, the Bajaj Dominar 400, as well as the undisputed king of this segment, which is the Royal Enfield Classic 350. And I am therefore here to find out the first part of the equation, which is if the Speed 400 is a pakka Triumph. And there's only one way to find out. Oh, 398cc liquid cooled DOHC 4-valve single, which pumps out a solid 40 PS and 37.5 Newton meters of torque for a motorcycle which only weighs in at 176 kgs wet. And what that means is the Triumph Speed 400 is plenty quick. But what makes it a Triumph is the way all this firepower is delivered. It doesn't punch you in your face like the KTM Duke 390. It's a lot more understated, more like a sleeper. But provoke it and is more than happy to play ball. Because you have 30 Newton meters of its 37.5 Newton meters of torque available from just 3000 RPM. And an equally strong top end to boot. I mean, I could register a top speed of 165 kilometers an hour at the Chakan Straight before running out of road, with the engine still pulling strong. But the difference here is the refinement. The fueling on this is immaculate. The on-off throttle transitions very, very smooth. Now don't get me wrong, there are vibes which come and go around 4500 RPM and really make their presence felt above 7000 RPM, close to the rev ceiling. But I could still easily cruise around in the 6th gear at about 130-135 kilometers an hour with the engine still running nice and smooth, because the vibrations lose their sting in the higher gears. And still at that point of time, you still have plenty of torque available in the 6th gear for those quick overtakes. And the more I pushed the motorcycle, the more it seemed to open up, letting me believe there's a lot more top end in reserve. Top end which you can fully exploit thanks to the phenomenal braking power of the Speed 400. But initially I was a little bit disappointed to know that this one gets a 300mm disc compared to the 320mm on the Scrambler 400. So I spoke to Triumph about it and they said that they have done this on purpose to reduce the rotating mass and to offset the additional weight of the more rigid and heavier wheels which the Indian spec Speed 400 gets to better suit our Indian road conditions. And honestly, with the sintered pads, the radial caliper and the sticky Apollo H1W rated tires, they left me very little to complain about. Because the braking performance in terms of the bite, the feel and the stopping power left me very impressed. In fact, the only place where the tires left me wanting was in the wet. In the dry, they really impressed in terms of the feedback, in terms of the edge grip. But in the wet, I felt the feedback from the front reduced dramatically. I wasn't 100% aware of what was happening at the front, and then that meant that I did not feel as confident riding this in the wet as I did in the dry conditions. So it checks the boxes in terms of refinement, also in terms of performance. But how does a Speed 400 take to the corners? And for that, we have to look at the suspension setup. So you have 43 mm upside down forks from Endurance at the front, 140 mm of travel, you have 130 mm travel at the back, a monoshock with preload adjustability. The overall setup is to provide you with a really plush ride quality because this is a roadster. And it does that really well. It takes all of these undulations in its strides, really absorbs all the bumps very well. But the crazy part is, the same setup also manages to put a smile across your face when you hit the canyons. I don't remember ever scraping the foot pegs this much ever before on a roadster. The chassis inspires a lot of confidence, is very communicative, and even the tires, the H1s in the dry, were phenomenal. But having said that, this is definitely not a motorcycle that you take to the racetrack because it's not really set up that way. Yeah, it's too soft, and when you really start braking really deep in the corner, as we were at the Chakan racetrack and trying to attack corners, the bike was just simply tying itself in knots because it just did not have enough damping support from the suspension. And that's okay, because that was not the intent of the Speed 400. Now, because this is a roadster, it also scores really high on the practical side. So it's really compact, really light, but it still fits my 5'11" frame really well. I did not feel really cramped on it. Initially I was scared that this might look too small, but that's not really the case. Also, it has a really short wheelbase, which means it's really quick on its feet, and also has a really good turning radius, which means you can slice through traffic. On the engine front, because you have such a wide torque band, you can easily ride this in the city with minimum gear changes. You can be riding at crawling speeds in the third gear and it will pull cleanly as soon as you get on the gas, because the fueling low down is really good. The seat height is very accessible at 790 mm. You get switchable traction control, you get Type-C port for quick charging. On the heat front, yes, I did feel a little bit of heat when I was really stuck in chock-a-block traffic, but honestly, it was not excessive by any count. And also when it comes to the craftsmanship, Triumph and Bajaj have undoubtedly set a new benchmark, yeah, when it comes to motorcycles in this category. Because if you look at the paint job, the attention to detail, the fit and finish, this is nothing short of what we expect from a Triumph. I mean, just if you look at the engine layout, right? The modern classic layout, just so that this can match its elder siblings, the engine on this is actually 5.5 kgs heavier than the unit on the Dominar 400. And yet, the motorcycle, especially in the international spec, is 170 kgs. Of course, this one is 6 kgs heavier, the Indian spec, because of the Sari guard and the engine guard. You have different grab rails and the heavier wheels. But that still goes on to show the amount of effort, the lengths that Bajaj and Triumph went to stick true to their ethos. Now, as good as it all sounds, there is still scope for improvement. First off, this doesn't get Bluetooth connectivity, doesn't get adjustable levers or backlit switches, which we have come to expect from Bajaj. Also, the seat, I felt, can do with a little more padding, especially for the long hauls, which the bike is definitely capable of. Then you have the 6-speed transmission, which is actually really precise. Even when we were riding the bike hard at the racetrack, doing really aggressive downshifts, they slot in perfectly, but I felt that they were not as slick. The gearbox required a little more effort compared to, say, the gearbox on the Dominar 400. Yeah, so it definitely can be a little more slick. But more than anything else, I feel Triumph has missed out on giving the Speed 400 with a distinctive exhaust note which we have always associated with Triumph motorcycles. I know, this is a single, it's not a twin or a triple that we have always loved. But in my defense, there have been other manufacturers who have done a really good job in how their singles sound, including Bajaj. But I also feel like I'm nitpicking because the Speed 400 undoubtedly has surpassed my expectations by a country mile. And all I can do is tip my hat to Bajaj and Triumph for setting this new precedent, for proving to this automotive industry that you can still provide great craftsmanship, great performance on a motorcycle while still pricing it and making it very, very accessible. So yeah, by the looks of it, I too have come around and I've taken a liking for the word disruption.